Matt, this has been a really fantastic discussion. We've talked about innovation. We've talked about practical tips that small business owners can take to not only weather the storm, find a pathway forward towards success once we get past the worst of the impact of COVID-19. And we've talked about equity. But as we look to the future, I want to talk a little bit about some next steps. Senate leaders were quick to point out that the $2.2 trillion stimulus package was not a stimulus. Instead, it was simply an emergency relief fund. They've already started to craft additional financial and policy responses to support individuals and businesses. What would you like to see in a future Small Business Support Act?
One of the things that I felt was missing from the PPP program was there really wasn't a needs-based test. And so when you looked at the PPP application, the potential borrower didn't have to prove that their business was indeed harmed by the virus. Even though, it seems to me that if I was a lender, the very first question I would be asking a nonprofit or small business is, hey, please show me how much you've been hurt by this crisis. And so for me, PPP was a very blunt instrument. And as you said, Chris, it really was just trying to get as much cash out the door as fast as possible in order for a lot of these organizations to stave off bankruptcy. For the next round, I would really like to see a more nuanced approach and a tool. Now that we have, a little more breathing room, it would be really great to see Congress come up with a tool that's a little bit more thoughtful about the different industries that have been impacted and how these lockdowns have impacted different industries, about encouraging growth in industries that will, be more important in the new world order: logistics, health tech, health research, retail, sanitation, food and bev, et cetera, right? So a more nuanced, thoughtful approach, whereas I think PPP was a cleaver. Now that work is done, let's create scalpels that are smarter and more targeted in how the money's distributed so that it isn't just a free-for-all. Because a lot of small businesses, if you one of the big friction points, and I think big disappointments for a lot of small business is because the keys to the kingdom were at the level of the banks and the credit unions, and there wasn't a lot of rules around who got what. I don't think it's a too cynical thought to express that you can imagine a lot of these banks and credit unions allocated PPP to their best customers and clients. I'm sure there were a lot of lenders out there that really treated this on a first come, first served basis. But I think that we all know the realities and the bias and that affect all of us when we're at work, and you want to treat the people that treated you well, right? So I'm not saying there was any wrongdoing by any stretch of the imagination, but ultimately PPP was a blunt instrument that created a free-for-all, when I think next go around we need something that's a lot more thoughtful and targeted.
I certainly subscribe to that notion, and the idea of how we can invest in our future would make a lot of sense to me. Though creating those jobs of the future is such a critical objective of government, and this is such a critical juncture that we have the opportunity to make a pivot towards long-term resiliency, long-term sustainability, whether it's in health tech or whether it's in energy. This could be a nexus point to propel us into true growth. As we wrap up, this is a scary time. And as much as we try to remind ourselves that this time will not last forever, the pandemic and the economic turmoil has caused a great deal of angst for people. What would you say to businesses or individuals who are concerned about the future?
This is unprecedented by historic proportions. There is nothing but problems, and innovators and entrepreneurs are amazing at identifying and addressing them. And so, the wisdom that I've always kept close to my heart at times like this is when times are good, you prepare for when times are bad. And when times are bad, you prepare for when times are good. If you're the leader of a small business or a nonprofit going through this crisis, now's the time to remember that you need to be preparing for when times will be good again.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for helping us weather this storm and then prepare for those better times ahead.
It's absolutely my pleasure, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And this has been a Zpryme Now special report. I'm Chris Moyer signing off.